House of Horror. I always remember my school days with horror. In addition to a religious mother and a sadistic father, whom I saw sober no more than twice in all the time, my classmates also poisoned my life. During the day I endured bullying and ridicule at school, and at home in the evening, beatings from my dear daddy. Not life, but a fairy tale. I used to be very afraid of the dead. Until one case, a crowd of bastards from school decided to play a trick on me. They couldn't think of anything better than locking me up in a dark back room with an anatomical skeleton from the biology class. I cried and begged them to let me out, but they didn't care. And then I resigned myself to fate. After spending more than 3 hours side by side with the skeleton, I was able to overcome my fear. Even found his friend attractive. There was something about him, I can't explain exactly, but it attracted me. After that incident, the theme of death became my main hobby and determined my entire future destiny. After graduating from high school, I entered medical school. With money I always had problems, and soon I had the opportunity to make good money. I began to steal the corpses that were used to train students and sell them. Of course, I didn't manage to do this often, but even those rare money at that time was quite enough for me. I never wanted to become a doctor. My head was full of commercial ideas, the central one being to start my own business. So right after graduating from medical school, I changed my name, married Clara, and moved to live closer to Chicago, more specifically, to a small town of the rich nearby, Inglewood. Unfortunately, with the bride, I lost. Her father did not believe in the sincerity of my intentions, and I failed to get a rich devotee. Smelly bastard. Yes, if I had known about this before, would I have coveted his ugly daughter? But the fact remains, I still had no money, but now a wife and a child have been added. In 1886, I took a job as a pharmacist in a pharmacy for an elderly man who was dying of cancer. The perfect place to fulfill my plans. It only remained to gain confidence in the old bastard and his wife, and then circle them around her finger. After the pharmacy owner died, I convinced his wife to sell me the business and the building. But I had nothing to pay with. Then I promised my grandmother that I would pay her off a little later. This fool believed and signed all the necessary documents. I breathed new life into the old drugstore. Who can resist a young, elegant and courteous salesman? And if he also sells magic water. Of course, the water was the most ordinary, except perhaps with the addition of vanillin, but people believed, and money flowed to me like a river. A couple of compliments and flirting sometimes do amazing things with brainless flabby aunts of advanced age. I could even sell them an old galosh, passing it off as a rejuvenating apple. The pharmacist's elderly widow prevented me from fully enjoying my success. Recently, she has become too persistently demanding her money for the shop, which I did not want to part with at all. Little old lady. Yes, if not for me, then someone else would have swindled her. One happy day, the old woman simply disappeared from her apartment. Chicago is a huge city. Who cares about some lonely old woman who already had one foot in the grave? So I thought, and I was not mistaken. After a while, I managed to save up a decent amount of money in order to open a business in which I could put my soul into. I have long looked after the building opposite the pharmacy, or rather, the land under it. Soon I managed to buy out the required plot, and demolish the building that stood on it. I dreamed of building in its place a truly grandiose and great creation, my own hotel. My torture chamber, my death chamber, my dream. I developed the exact plan of this place at school, only supplementing over time its details. So, I took the first floor for a hairdresser and shops, on the second there will be rooms for guests, and on the third, offices and my bedroom. Initially, I was not going to pay builders, so I recruited mostly emigrants and fired them after a probationary period. I gave each new team only a part of the drawing, so no one but me knew the whole picture of the internal layout of the premises. According to my idea, some rooms were unusually narrow and low, like a closet, others had powerful sound insulation, and others were sheathed with steel sheets. And everywhere there were pipes through which gas could be pumped into the premises. The control panel for all this gas facilities will be in my bedroom. On the second floor there will be hidden rooms where you need to install oiled gutters leading to the basement, and on the third, among other rooms, a safe the size of a room, in which a hole is drilled to also let gas in. In the basement I installed a vat of acid, barrels of quicklime, an anatomical table and an elasticity tester, or, as they say in the common people, a rack, and an oven. Thus, soon I, a modest apothecary, had a real house of horrors at my disposal. All that was left was to start the kill conveyor. The first thing I did after the construction was completed was to open a jewelry store on the first floor of my new building. Women love Satsuki, and I love women. I hired a watchmaker who had an extremely attractive wife as manager. Julia delighted all men, and I was no exception. Our romance was like a volcano bursting with passion. It was great time. Until Julia got pregnant and demanded that I marry her. True, at that time I already had 2 wives who did not know about each other. 3 wives is too much, even for me. Julia was aware of my shady drug dealings and threatened to expose my magic water scam if I didn't get married. I thought for a long time how to get out of such a predicament and finally found a way out. I could not afford to lose such a profitable and well-established business as a pharmacy, and therefore I promised Julia to marry her, but on one condition: she must have an abortion. Having told her that I could not trust her precious health to anyone, I volunteered to do the operation myself. Poor, naive Julia. She thought she knew all my secrets. Julia's skeleton was sold very profitably. She was very tall. One surgeon gladly bought it for $250. Emmeline, my secretary, became my next love. But at a certain moment she was impatient to get married. Just some kind of bad luck. And why are they all so eager to go there? Although there are advantages to any situation, I have long wanted to try out my new room-sized safe. The scraping of Emilina's nails against the iron walls of the safe was music to my ears. Still, what a fine fellow I am that I came up with such an attraction. Great idea. Emilina's skeleton was also sold to my now regular client, a surgeon. On May 1, 1893, the World's Columbian Exposition opened in Chicago to commemorate the 400th anniversary of the discovery of America. Tourists came in a dime a dozen. A real buffet where I could choose any dish for myself. It was in May 1893 that my brainchild began to work in full force. I chose quite a variety of methods of killing. I don't like routine. Most often, I poisoned people with chloroform, gassed them, or locked them in secret rooms with soundproofing until my guests died of starvation. It gave me particular pleasure to enter rooms through secret passages, and while an unsuspecting victim slept, to deprive her of her senses with the same chloroform, and then watch her wake up on my homemade rack, which stretched her body until the victim did not die of pain shock. A very calming sight. There were all sorts of situations, of course. And if suddenly one of the victims managed to get out and escape from her room, then she still had no chance to escape from the hotel to the street. I thought of every little detail. Among the many winding corridors it was difficult for everyone except me to navigate. Besides, I used sliding walls to cut off escape routes and further confuse the fugitive. After my amusements, there were quite a few corpses left, then wide pipes came to my rescue, penetrating the entire building and leading to the basement. Do not drag the bloody body along the corridor. Dry cleaning of carpets is also not a free pleasure, and guests may misunderstand. Finally, tired of the monotony, I prepared a new attraction, the Devil's Operating Room. Its essence was as follows. An unsuspecting victim wakes up and suddenly finds himself on the operating table. And then I take the stage. In a white coat, with steel tools sparkling in the lamplight. The cries of my patients were incomparable, better than any applause. It gave me great pleasure to perform an autopsy on people who were still alive, skinning them, and then turning the body into an anatomical model, which, again, could be sold to medical school. There were, however, more traditional methods of killing. For example, I beat one tourist who refused to pay for a room to death with a chair right behind the counter, and another parasite broke his head with a gas pipe. Once I decided to play a joke on a kiln installer. After he finished work, I asked him to climb into the mouth of the machine to clarify some technical details of the device, and then I slammed the door and turned it on at full power. Surprisingly, not even bones were left of the installer. It's funny, isn't it? In general, my business was going very well. The rooms in my hotel were vacated faster than those of competitors, so there was always a place for newly arrived tourists. And the things, forgotten by the guests also brought me a considerable income. But all good things come to an end sooner or later. The World's Columbian Exposition is over, and the flow of tourists has almost dried up. In addition, numerous angry creditors demanded to pay off their bills, threatening me with violence. Of course, I did not plan to share my hard-earned money, and therefore I decided to burn my offspring in order to receive an insurance payment and escape to Texas. Unfortunately, the arson scam is crowned with success. The fireman managed to extinguish everything too quickly, and the expert from the insurance company quickly realized that he was dealing with arson. To avoid prison, I went to Texas, where I was going to repeat my experience in building a hotel. One of my untimely deceased mistresses bequeathed me a large piece of land in this state. But my plans were not destined to come true. The Texans quickly figured me out. I had to run again. Not a trace remains of the former luxurious life. I wandered from city to city, but failures lay in wait for me everywhere. Several failed scams, an arrest, an unsuccessful staging of one's own death, the list is endless. My old sins were also revealed. The police began to search my hotel in search of evidence. True, what they saw shocked even experienced officers. What can I say? Geniuses know how to surprise. All my secrets were made public, and on November 17, 1849, I was arrested and my hotel was named the Devil's Castle. I confessed to only 27 murders, hoping to the last that they would let me live. But the court gave me a different verdict. The death penalty. When they asked me what prompted me to commit such terrible atrocities, I answered the jury the truth. I was born with the devil in my soul. I could not help but kill, just as a poet, overcome by inspiration, cannot be silent. The great enemy came to my mother's bed during childbirth to become my patron, and since then has remained my companion forever.